Amora woke up before dawn, her worn-out mattress creaking as she rolled over to silence her alarm. Her son, little Ifeanyi, lay beside her, his tiny hands clinging to her blanket. She watched him sleep for a moment, a sense of calm washing over her as she traced his delicate face with her eyes. Her life was hard, she knew it, but she held onto her faith like a lifeline, knowing God wouldn't abandon her. With Ifeanyi still asleep, Amora began her morning routine. She reached into her cupboard to make breakfast, but her face dropped when she found only a handful of garri left. Just enough for a thin meal. She sighed, glancing at her son, who would soon be awake and hungry. "Lord, provide for us," she whispered, gripping the edge of the countertop. As she stirred the meager food, her mind wandered to the bills piling up on her table and the growing number of calls from her landlord demanding rent. Outside, Lagos was stirring to life, street vendors shouting, cars honking, and people rushing off to beat the infamous morning traffic. Amora watched the bustling street from her small window, feeling both a part of it and separate from it, as if her struggles had placed an invisible wall between her and the rest of the world. The radio, crackling with static, caught her attention. "Come to the house of divine revelation," a powerful voice boomed. "Miracles, financial breakthroughs, healing, and blessings await. Come, and you shall never lack." The words clung to her heart. She'd heard of this Pastor Ezekiel before, known for his charismatic sermons and the life-changing miracles he performed. A neighbor had claimed her business tripled after attending his church. Amora's heart pounded with curiosity and the allure of hope. Could this be the answer to her prayers? Could Pastor Ezekiel truly have the power to transform her life? The thought stirred something within her, a blend of excitement and caution. What if, she thought, biting her lip. This single decision could mean the difference between a life of struggle and the breakthrough she desperately craved. The following Sunday, Amora donned her best dress, a simple yet beautiful Ankara print that had seen better days. She felt out of place as she entered the massive church in Lekki, a far cry from the modest worship halls she was used to. Towering above her, the church walls sparkled under extravagant chandeliers. Her steps faltered as she noticed the sharply dressed congregants around her, each appearing well off and radiant, like they had already tasted the prosperity Pastor Ezekiel promised. As the service began, the choir filled the air with a song so heavenly it felt surreal. Amora closed her eyes, swaying to the music, allowing it to transport her beyond her worries. Just as her spirit was soaring, the lights dimmed, and a single spotlight illuminated the stage. Pastor Ezekiel stepped into it, a towering man with a striking presence. His voice, deep and commanding, rolled over the congregation like a wave, pulling everyone in with every word he spoke. "Welcome, beloved," he called, and the crowd erupted into applause. Amora found herself clapping along, her heart pounding. Pastor Ezekiel's sermon was a blend of scripture, promises, and anecdotes of miraculous transformations that sent shivers down her spine. To the faithful, blessings flow like rivers, he declared, his voice resonating with a conviction that made her believe anything was possible. He looked directly at her, his gaze intense and unwavering. "You," he pointed. "Yes, sister in the Ankara dress. God sees your suffering, and he says, enough is enough." Amora's breath caught. Was he talking about her? Was this the sign she'd been praying for? Pastor Ezekiel continued, "Tonight, your breakthrough is coming. Doors shall open that no man can close." The congregation shouted, "Amen." But amidst the excitement, a small voice within her whispered caution. Could this man really see her pain, or was he merely skilled at reading people? The answer remained elusive, but the spark of hope was already kindling inside her heart. As Amora walked through the grand gates of House of Divine Revelation, she felt as though she'd stepped into another world. The air was scented with a blend of myrrh and rose oil, adding to the sense of mystique. Inside, polished floors gleamed under the soft glow of chandeliers, and ushers in immaculate white robes guided her to a seat close to the altar. She noticed the plush seats, the opulent decor, and the grandeur that filled every corner of this sanctuary. It all felt surreal, a striking contrast to her humble flat in Ikeja. She glanced around, noticing the congregation. The women wore intricate girly head wraps and glittering jewelry, while the men sported expensive suits and watches. They exuded an aura of wealth and success, their laughter and animated conversations filling the air. Amora clutched her worn purse tighter, feeling both excited and out of place. She wondered if she'd made a mistake coming here. As the choir took the stage, the lights dimmed, casting a warm glow over the singers dressed in flowing white robes. They began with a soulful hymn, their harmonies blending in a way that seemed to reach deep into her soul. Amora felt tears prick at her eyes. She had attended church her whole life, but nothing had ever felt this intense, this divine. Then, just as her heart was surrendering to the moment, the lights dimmed further, and a hush fell over the crowd. Pastor Ezekiel appeared, dressed in a sharp white suit that glistened under the lights. His presence was magnetic, his gaze piercing as he took in the crowd. He exuded a confidence that bordered on rigor, his head held high and his steps measured. "Beloved, tonight, I welcome you into the arms of miracles and divine revelation," he proclaimed, his voice echoing through the hall. Amora felt a chill run down her spine. There was something almost otherworldly about him, as if he held the power to bridge the gap between heaven and earth. The tension in the air was palpable, and she could sense everyone around her holding their breath, waiting for what he would say next. Amora was gripped, curiosity coursing through her. Could Pastor Ezekiel truly possess the key to the blessings she so desperately sought? Pastor Ezekiel stood before them, his gaze sharp and unyielding as he scanned the faces in the congregation. Every eye was on him, and he seemed to bask in their adoration. His charisma was undeniable, something about him made people lean in, and onto every word. He didn't just preach, he commanded attention, his voice powerful and rich as he began his sermon. "Children of God," he boomed, his voice sending shivers through Amora. "Do you know that tonight, God has written miracles with your name on them?" A wave of excitement rippled through the crowd. Murmurs of anticipation filled the hall. Amora felt herself swept up in it, her heartbeat quickening as she drank in his words. Pastor Ezekiel shared stories that seemed almost too good to be true, stories of people whose lives had been changed by attending his services. A woman who had suffered for years with an illness was suddenly healed after he prayed for her. A struggling businessman had seen his fortune soar after sowing a faith seed into the church. Each tale was woven with an intensity that left the listeners captivated. He locked eyes with Amora again, and this time, his gaze seemed to pierce straight into her soul. "God has told me that someone here is carrying a burden, a heavy burden, and that tonight is the night it will be lifted." His words struck her heart like a hammer, the weight of her own struggles flooding her mind. How could he know? Could he truly see her suffering? A subtle unease prickled at the edges of her mind, but the promise of relief was too powerful to resist. Amora felt herself drawn deeper, like a moth to a flame. Pastor Ezekiel's voice filled the room, declaring blessings, healing, and financial breakthroughs. She whispered amen with the crowd, the sense of mystery and promise swirling around her like a veil. But beneath it all, a quiet question lingered, one she dared not voice. Was it possible he knew her better than she knew herself, or was something else at play here? As the service ended, Amora moved toward the exit, her mind buzzing with emotions she couldn't quite place. The words of Pastor Ezekiel lingered in her mind, reverberating with an intensity that was both comforting and unsettling. She'd been on her way out when she felt a gentle but firm grip on her shoulder. Turning around, she was startled to see Pastor Ezekiel himself standing there, his gaze as piercing as it had been from the pulpit. "Sister Amora," he said, his voice softer but no less commanding. her breath caught in her throat. How did he know her name? She hadn't introduced herself, and with so many congregants, it seemed impossible that he'd remembered her from the stage. As if reading her thoughts, he smiled, his expression one of gentle understanding. God reveals many things to those who listen, he explained, his voice warm yet laced with mystery. He asked about her life, her struggles, and her dreams. Each question seemed to peel back a layer of her soul, leaving her feeling raw yet somehow lighter. As she shared her story, Pastor Ezekiel nodded, his face solemn and thoughtful. You are chosen for something greater, Amora, he whispered. But the enemy has placed obstacles in your path. Fear not, I am here to guide you. Return next Sunday, and we will break these chains together. Amora felt a swell of hope, her doubts fading under his steady gaze. But a flicker of unease stirred in her heart. His promises sounded almost too good to be true. She pushed the thought aside, convincing herself it was her own skepticism trying to rob her of a miracle. As she walked out of the church, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just taken a dramatic turn. Yet a voice deep within her whispered, "Be careful, Amora. Be careful." The following Sunday, Amora arrived early, her heart pounding with anticipation. She took her seat and watched the congregation fill up, each face glowing with the same excitement that buzzed within her. Pastor Ezekiel took the stage with his usual charisma, but tonight, something felt different. He wore a grave expression, his usual smile replaced with a look of intense focus. Sisters and brothers, tonight we face the forces that seek to bind us, he announced, his voice carrying a strange, almost hypnotic resonance. The lights dimmed, casting the room in shadow. The choir began a low, haunting chant, creating an atmosphere thick with mystery and anticipation. Pastor Ezekiel held up a small vial of clear liquid, explaining that it was blessed water, a divine conduit that would purge evil and open doors to miracles. He invited the congregants to come forward, and Amora joined the line, heart racing. When her turn came, Pastor Ezekiel poured a few drops of the water into her hands, instructing her to drink it while reciting a prayer he whispered into her ear. The words sounded foreign and ancient, as though they came from a time long forgotten. As she drank, a strange sensation washed over her. Her heart pounded, and her skin prickled. The room seemed to darken further, and for a brief moment, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders, only to be replaced by a lingering sense of unease. Around her, the other congregants were murmuring praises, some even crying with joy. Amora forced herself to smile, trying to ignore the unsettling feeling that gnawed at her gut. Was this the beginning of her miracle, or had she opened a door she didn't fully understand? In the following weeks, Pastor Ezekiel's sermons grew more intense. He spoke of blessings that awaited those who were willing to sacrifice in faith. Give, and it shall be given unto you, he proclaimed, his voice carrying a fervor that left the congregation hanging on every word. The size of your miracle depends on the size of your faith. Bring forth your offerings, and watch as heaven's windows open for you. Amora felt the pull of his words. Money was tight, yet she found herself believing that perhaps, just perhaps, her small contribution would open doors she never thought possible. When the offering baskets were passed around, she dug into her purse and pulled out what little cash she had, her hands trembling as she placed it into the basket. She closed her eyes, whispering a silent prayer for financial relief, for stability, for a chance to give Ifeanyi a better life. Days later, she received a call for a freelance tailoring job. It wasn't much, but it was more than she'd expected, and she clung to the belief that her faith seed had brought this blessing. She found herself looking forward to the next Sunday, eager to give again, to receive more blessings, and to edge closer to the life she dreamed of. Yet, amidst the excitement, a quiet voice nagged at her mind. Was this truly faith, or was she being led by promises that sounded almost scripted? The thought was unsettling, and she brushed it aside, convinced that doubting Pastor Ezekiel meant doubting the miracles that were just beginning to unfold. As Amora continued attending the church, small but hopeful things began happening in her life. The tailor job led to another, and she began receiving more clients through word of mouth. Each time she completed a project, she whispered a prayer of gratitude, convinced that Pastor Ezekiel's blessings were at work. Yet, doubts began creeping in. Some of the church members whispered stories of miraculous financial transformations, tales of lottery winnings, unexpected inheritances, or new businesses booming overnight. Amora couldn't help but notice, however, that these stories seemed to come from strangers or people she'd never seen at church. No one she knew personally had experienced these miracles, and she began to wonder if these tales were just rumors. One evening, as she sewed late into the night, a troubling thought emerged. What if these coincidences weren't miracles? What if they were just life? She quickly shook her head, dismissing the thought as negativity. But the idea lingered, an insistent whisper at the back of her mind. In her next meeting with Pastor Ezekiel, she decided to share her struggles. He listened intently, his eyes narrowed as though he were peering into her very soul. Your breakthrough is near, Amora, he assured her. But you must press on. You must continue to sow seeds of faith. Great blessings require great sacrifices. His words sent a chill through her. She nodded, convinced yet again, but the flicker of doubt had taken root, refusing to be silenced. One afternoon, Amara was on her way home from the market when she overheard a conversation between two women at a street vendor. They were talking about Pastor Ezekiel's church, and their words stopped her in her tracks. I heard they make people drink some special, holy water, to purify them, one woman said, her tone laced with skepticism. Oh, don't even talk about that, man, the other woman replied. My sister's friend went there. She gave all her money, thinking it would make her rich. Now she's struggling more than ever. Amora felt her stomach tighten. Her mind raced as she tried to push aside the doubts that had been growing within her. But the woman's words lingered, echoing the questions she'd been too afraid to ask herself. That evening, as she sat alone in her flat, Amora found herself staring at her modest possessions, thinking about the money she'd given to the church. She wanted to believe that Pastor Ezekiel's promises were real, that her sacrifices would lead to blessings. But the rumors gnawed at her, filling her with a dread she couldn't shake. She prayed for clarity, for some kind of sign that would confirm her faith. But all she had was silence, a vast emptiness that made her heart ache. For the first time, Amara wondered if she'd placed her trust in the wrong hands. The thought was terrifying, and she clutched her Bible tighter, as though it could protect her from the storm of doubt threatening to engulf her. That night, after her troubling encounter with the gossiping women, Amora drifted into a restless sleep. Her mind was filled with fragments of her day, scenes from the church, and images of Pastor Ezekiel's face looming over her, his eyes intense and unreadable. As she tossed and turned, the dream took a darker turn. In her dream, she found herself standing in a grand hall that looked like the inside of Pastor Ezekiel's church, but something was different. The chandeliers cast eerie, distorted shadows, and the polished floors seemed to ripple like water beneath her feet. She could hear the choir singing, but the melody was twisted, haunting, almost mournful. As she looked around, she saw Pastor Ezekiel standing at the altar, dressed in a black robe. His expression was unreadable, almost sinister, and his eyes glowed with a strange intensity. He beckoned her forward, his hand outstretched. Against her will, she moved toward him, her legs feeling heavy, as though she were wading through thick mud. Just as she reached the altar, Pastor Ezekiel held up a vial of the blessed water, and his smile twisted into something dark, almost malevolent. Drink, he commanded, his voice echoing unnaturally in the vast hall. Amara felt a chill run through her, but she couldn't stop herself. Her hands moved against her will, taking the vial and bringing it to her lips. As she drank, a bitter, metallic taste filled her mouth, and a wave of nausea. Suddenly, she woke up, gasping for air, her heart racing. She sat up, clutching her chest as her breathing slowed, but the sense of dread lingered. The dream had felt too real, too vivid. She whispered a prayer, seeking comfort, but the unease remained, a quiet warning that echoed in her heart long after she'd awakened. The next day, Amora couldn't shake the strange dream. She decided to visit her neighbor, Mama Nkechi, an elderly woman known for her wisdom and strong faith. After sharing a cup of tea, Amora confided in her about the unsettling dream and her growing doubts about Pastor Ezekiel. Mama Nkechi listened carefully, her expression grave. "My daughter, God speaks to us in many ways. Sometimes He uses dreams to warn us of things we cannot see in the daylight," she said, her voice soft but firm. Amora nodded, feeling a mix of relief and fear. Mama Nkechi continued, "I have heard stories about that church. They say people go there and lose themselves, giving everything in the hope of miracles. And sometimes they lose more than just their money." The words struck Amora like a blow, and she felt her stomach twist. Could it be true? Had she been blinded by her own desperation? Mama Nkechi took her hand, her gaze steady. "Be careful, Amora. Not all who call themselves shepherds are sent by God." As she walked home, Mama Nkechi's words echoed in her mind. Amora felt a mix of shame and confusion. She had been so eager to believe in Pastor Ezekiel's promises, to find hope in his words. But now, doubt gnawed at her heart, a small yet persistent voice warning her that something was very wrong. That evening, Amora attended a small prayer gathering hosted by a group of local believers she'd known for years. They welcomed her warmly, and as they prayed together, she felt a sense of peace that had been missing in her recent experiences. The simplicity of their gathering contrasted starkly with the grandiosity of Pastor Ezekiel's services, and she found herself questioning the path she'd been on. After the prayer session, Amora confided in one of the women, Kemi, about her experiences at Pastor Ezekiel's church. Kemi listened intently, her face growing increasingly concerned. "Amora, I've heard about that church. Some say it's not just about worship. They say it's a business, using people's desperation for miracles." Amora's heart sank as she listened, a heavy feeling settling over her. Could it be true? Could Pastor Ezekiel be using people's faith for his own gain? Kemi placed a hand on her shoulder, her gaze filled with sympathy. "Faith should bring you peace, not fear, my sister. Remember that." As she walked home that night, Amora felt as though she were standing at a crossroads. The doubts that had been simmering beneath the surface were now impossible to ignore. But a part of her still clung to the hope that Pastor Ezekiel was genuine, that his promises of blessings and miracles were real. She prayed for guidance, hoping that God would show her the truth. In the days that followed, Amora tried to carry on with her life as usual, but an ominous feeling lingered. She found herself constantly looking over her shoulder, feeling as though she were being watched. It was subtle at first, a shadow in her periphery, a figure that seemed to vanish when she looked closely. She told herself it was just her imagination, but the sense of unease only grew stronger. One evening, as she was returning home from a late errand, she noticed a man following her. She quickened her pace, glancing over her shoulder to confirm her suspicion. The man was dressed in dark clothing, his face obscured by a hood. Panic rose in her chest, and she broke into a run, her heart pounding as she darted down a side street. When she finally reached her apartment, she locked the door, her hands shaking as she leaned against it, gasping for breath. She listened carefully, waiting to hear footsteps, but the silence was deafening. Slowly, her breathing steadied, but the fear remained. The next morning, she found a note slipped under her door. In elegant handwriting, it read, "Faith requires sacrifice. Don't doubt the path you've chosen." Her heart raced as she read the words, the sense of foreboding overwhelming her. She had never told anyone about her doubts. Could Pastor Ezekiel know? Was this a warning? Amora felt trapped, torn between fear and faith. She clutched the note tightly, her mind racing. She had wanted a miracle, but now she was starting to wonder if she'd invited something darker into her life. That Sunday, Amora returned to the church, feeling as though she were walking into a lion's den. She watched Pastor Ezekiel closely as he preached, searching for any hint of insincerity, but his charisma was as powerful as ever. He spoke of sacrifices, of faith that could move mountains, and Amora felt herself drawn in, despite the doubts gnawing at her heart. At the end of the sermon, Pastor Ezekiel called for those in need of special blessings to come forward. He held up a small, golden box, claiming it contained holy relics that would grant prosperity and protection to anyone who donated generously. Give as much as you can, and God will return it 100-fold, he promised, his voice filled with fervor. Amora's heart pounded as she watched people approach the altar, placing money into the box. She wanted to believe, to trust that her sacrifice would bring her the breakthrough she desperately needed. But the memory of the note, of the shadow that had followed her, held her back. As she watched, she felt a strange sense of detachment, as though she were watching herself from a distance. The allure of the promises felt hollow, the blessings tainted by the fear that had taken root in her heart. She stayed in her seat, hands clenched tightly in her lap, her mind a wall of confusion and doubt. The path she had chosen was shrouded in shadows, and she couldn't tell if the light she sought was real or just an illusion. After the service, Amora lingered, watching as the congregation slowly dispersed. She approached Pastor Ezekiel, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. She had to know the truth, even if it meant confronting the man who had once inspired her with hope. "Pastor, I need to understand," she began, her voice wavering. "Are these sacrifices, are they truly necessary for blessings? Why do they feel like something else?" Pastor Ezekiel's expression darkened for a brief moment, but he quickly replaced it with a reassuring smile. "My dear, faith requires tests. Not everyone understands the path God has set for them. Doubt is the enemy's tool to keep you from your blessings." He placed a hand on her shoulder, his gaze intense. "I see greatness in you, Amora. But you must overcome your doubts. Only then can you receive the blessings you seek." Amora felt a chill run through her. His words sounded genuine, but there was a coldness in his eyes that unsettled her. She nodded, forcing a smile, but inside, her heart was screaming for her to run. She left the church that day feeling more conflicted than ever, caught between her faith and the darkness that seemed to shadow her every step. A few days later, Amora received a message from an unknown number. It was a woman named Tolu, who claimed she used to attend Pastor Ezekiel's church. Tolu asked to meet, saying she had something important to share. Against her better judgment, Amora agreed, curiosity winning over caution. They met in a small, quiet cafe. Tolu looked wary and kept glancing over her shoulder. Her voice was low and cautious as she began, "I was in deep with Pastor Ezekiel's church, like you. I believed every word he said, gave everything I had, and followed every instruction." She paused, a haunted look in her eyes. "But the blessings never came. Instead, I started to lose things, friends, money, even my own peace of mind." Amora felt a shiver run down her spine. "Why did you leave?" she asked. Tolu hesitated, glancing around the cafe again. "Because I found out things I never wanted to believe. Pastor Ezekiel isn't just taking money. There are rumors about deals, secret gatherings at night, and strange rituals disguised as prayer. It's as if he's feeding on people's faith." She looked down, her face filled with regret. "Living wasn't easy. People followed me, warned me to stay silent. But you need to be careful, Amora. Once you're in, They don't let you go so easily. Amora felt her heart pounding, her mind racing with fear and confusion. She wanted to dismiss Tolu's words as bitter ramblings, but deep down, she knew there was truth in them. As Tolu left, Amora sat alone, her thoughts a chaotic whirl. She realized she was no longer just questioning her faith, she was beginning to question her safety. That weekend, Amora attended the church again, her mind still reeling from Tolu's warnings. During the service, she noticed something strange. Pastor Ezekiel's sermon was less about scripture and more about loyalty to him and to the mission. He spoke of enemies, those who turned their backs on blessings, and warned against disloyalty. His words sent a chill down her spine, as if he were speaking directly to her. After the service, he called Amora aside, his gaze piercing. "I sense a burden on your heart, my daughter," he said, his voice soft yet insistent. "Faith is a journey that demands sacrifice. Some people don't understand and stray, but you are not like them. You are chosen." Amora forced a smile, feeling her hands grow clammy. "I hope so, Pastor," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. He placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression intense. "To strengthen your faith, I have a special task for you. There's a midnight prayer session this Friday, an exclusive gathering. Only those with the strongest faith attend." He smiled, his teeth gleaming under the church's dim lights. "Come, and you will find clarity." Amora felt her heart drop. Midnight prayer. She had never heard of such a thing. A warning bell rang in her mind, echoing Tolu's words. But she nodded, unsure of how to refuse. She knew she needed answers, and this special gathering might be her chance to find them, even if the truth turned out to be darker than she could imagine. When Friday night arrived, Amora felt a mix of dread and determination. She slipped out of her house quietly, making her way to the church under the cover of darkness. The streets were silent, and the air was thick with an ominous tension. As she approached the church, she noticed several other people gathered outside, all with the same anxious expressions. They exchanged uneasy glances but said nothing. Inside, the church was dimly lit, the usual warm lighting replaced by flickering candles that cast eerie shadows on the walls. Pastor Ezekiel stood at the altar, dressed in a black robe, his face partially obscured by shadow. His smile was gone, replaced by a somber expression that sent a chill through Amora. He began to speak, his voice low and commanding, reciting verses that were unfamiliar to her. The words sounded ancient, strange, as though they weren't from the Bible she knew. The congregation murmured in response, their voices blending into a low, unsettling hum. Amora felt an urge to leave, but her feet seemed rooted to the ground, compelled by a strange mixture of fear and curiosity. Then, Pastor Ezekiel pulled out a small vial, similar to the one in her dream, and held it up. "Tonight, we cleanse ourselves of all doubt and fear," he intoned. He instructed each member to drink from the vial, one by one, as a test of faith. When it was her turn, Amora's hands shook as she held the vial, the contents swelling within. She felt a rush of terror, remembering Tolu's warnings. Was this part of the ritual Tolu had mentioned? As she raised the vial to her lips, she hesitated, her instinct screaming for her to stop. But all eyes were on her, and Pastor Ezekiel's gaze was dark, demanding. She took a small sip, praying silently for protection. A strange warmth spread through her, leaving her feeling lightheaded. The room began to blur, and she felt herself sinking, her mind drifting into a fog as Pastor Ezekiel's voice echoed around her. She struggled to stay alert, but the darkness closed in, leaving her with only one thought: what have I done? The next morning, Amora woke up in her bed, her mind foggy. She struggled to remember how she'd gotten home, but her memory was a haze of broken images, candlelight, shadows, Pastor Ezekiel's voice chanting words she couldn't understand. Her heart raced as fragments of the night resurfaced, filling her with a sense of dread. She tried to shake off the feeling, but it lingered, growing stronger as the day wore on. She went to her sewing shop, hoping the familiar routine would calm her, but her mind kept drifting back to the night before. Her hands trembled, and her work suffered as her thoughts spiraled with fear and confusion. A sudden realization struck her. She remembered drinking from the vial, the warmth that had spread through her, and the darkness that had followed. She had felt powerless, as if her own will had been stripped away. Her stomach turned at the thought. She had never believed in dark forces, but last night had felt wrong. Evil. That evening, she confided in Mama Ngechi, who listened with a grave expression. Amora, you have to be careful. It sounds like he's using something other than faith to control people. Her words were heavy with warning. Whatever you felt last night, it wasn't holy. This man isn't a shepherd of God, he's something else. Amora felt a shiver run through her. She had been so eager for blessings, so desperate to believe in Pastor Ezekiel's promises, but now she saw the danger she had walked into. She realized she had to get out, to distance herself from the church. But a question haunted her: would they let her leave so easily? The following Sunday, Amora decided not to attend the service. She couldn't bear to face Pastor Ezekiel again, not after what she'd experienced. Instead, she spent the morning in her room, praying for guidance and strength. Later that day, she received a visit from one of Pastor Ezekiel's assistants, a stern man named Brother Jide. He wore a solemn expression as he handed her a letter sealed with a wax stamp. Pastor Ezekiel wishes to remind you of your commitment to the church, he said, his tone cold. Amora opened the letter once Brother Jide had left. Inside, she found a handwritten note from Pastor Ezekiel. It read, "Faith cannot falter. Once you are chosen, there is no turning back. Remember the path you have begun, and know that to stray is to invite darkness upon yourself." The message was clear. Amora felt her blood run cold, realizing that Pastor Ezekiel knew she had doubted him, had even considered leaving. She felt trapped, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and defiance. She had wanted to believe in miracles, in blessings, but now she felt as though she had entered a nightmare. That night, she lay awake, thinking about Tolu, the strange rituals, and the dark presence that seemed to follow her. She knew she had to find a way out, to escape the grip Pastor Ezekiel had over her life. But a terrible thought gnawed at her: how far would he go to keep her from leaving? The next day, Amora took a risky step. Determined to expose Pastor Ezekiel's manipulative ways, she borrowed a small recording device from a friend who was studying journalism. She planned to attend the next church service and capture anything suspicious he said or did. She knew it was dangerous, but she needed proof for herself, for the others still trapped, and for anyone who might listen. When Sunday arrived, she placed the device carefully in her purse and attended the service with a steady resolve. The church was packed, and as she watched, she noticed a disturbing change in the crowd. They seemed more subdued, their faces blank and expressionless, as if under some kind of spell. Pastor Ezekiel's voice boomed over them, his words focused on obedience and sacrifice. Amora's pulse quickened as she recorded, each of his statements more unsettling than the last. "Faith is not free," he intoned, his voice dripping with authority. "It demands your total surrender. Only those who give fully will be free from suffering." He talked about enemies lurking within, people who doubted and spread lies, warning that their faith would bring them ruin. As she left that day, her heart raced with a strange combination of fear and triumph. She had the evidence she needed, but she felt a foreboding sense that her actions hadn't gone unnoticed. Her instincts told her Pastor Ezekiel wouldn't let her leave quietly. The following evening, Amora received an anonymous text message: "I know what you're planning. Meet me tomorrow at the old library." Her heart pounded as she read the message. Who could this be? Was it a threat, or could it be someone who had also seen the truth? After a moment's hesitation, she decided to go, driven by her desperation to escape and expose the truth. She arrived at the library, her heart racing with anticipation and fear. A man emerged from the shadows, turned, a former church member she barely remembered. He looked weary, his eyes haunted. "I left the church a few months ago," he explained, his voice low. "Like you, I started asking questions, and I saw things that didn't add up. But it's dangerous to leave. Pastor Ezekiel has people everywhere." Amora felt a shiver run down her spine. "Then why are you helping me?" "Because I know what he's capable of," Tond replied, his gaze intense. "I tried to expose him once, but he has connections, powerful ones. I didn't have enough proof. But if we work together, maybe we can get the evidence we need." Amora felt a surge of hope. For the first time, she realized she wasn't alone. She nodded, her fear tempered by newfound resolve. Together, they began to devise a plan to reveal the dark underpinnings of Pastor Ezekiel's ministry. That night, Amora and Tond made a daring decision. They would sneak into the church's offices after hours to search for records, documents, anything that could expose the hidden truth. It was a dangerous plan, but they both knew it might be their only chance. They arrived just after midnight, the church looming ominously in the darkness. Amora's heart pounded as they slipped in through a side door Tond had managed to unlock. The silence inside was unsettling, and every creak seemed to echo through the vast, empty space. They made their way to Pastor Ezekiel's office, where Tond began rummaging through the drawers and files. As Amora searched, she stumbled upon a hidden compartment in the desk. Inside, she found several folders, each containing records of donations, names, addresses, and personal notes. Some of the names had been marked with red ink, with strange symbols scrawled beside them. "Look at this," she whispered, showing Tond the pages. His face paled as he scanned the documents. "These are people who've left the church," he murmured, his voice tight with fear. "He's tracking them, threatening them." Just then, they heard footsteps approaching. Panic surged through Amora as she grabbed the files, shoving them into her bag. They quickly made their way to a back exit, slipping out just as the door opened behind them. They ran through the night, the weight of their discovery heavy on their minds. The next morning, Amora was awoken by a loud banging on her door. She froze, heart racing, as she peered through the peephole. It was Brother Jide, Pastor Ezekiel's assistant, his face expressionless as he stood outside her door. She knew he wasn't here for a friendly visit. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door, keeping her expression calm. "Brother Jide, what brings you here?" He studied her, his gaze cold. "Pastor Ezekiel is concerned about your recent absence and lack of devotion. He has asked me to remind you of your commitment to the church." Amora forced a smile. "I've been busy," she replied, hoping her voice didn't betray her fear. "But I'm still committed." He stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "Pastor Ezekiel doesn't tolerate disloyalty, Amora. Be careful where your heart strays." With that, he turned and left, but not before giving her a look that sent chills down her spine. As the door closed, Amora felt a surge of determination. She couldn't live under this kind of fear. She knew it was time to take her evidence public, no matter the consequences. The following week, Amora and Tond gathered their recordings, documents, and testimonies. They approached a local journalist, a young woman named Ifeoma, who had a reputation for exposing corruption. After listening to their story, Ifeoma agreed to help. She promised to publish an article that would reveal the truth about Pastor Ezekiel and his exploitation of desperate followers. The article went live on a Sunday morning, just as the church service began. The title read, "Faith or Fraud? The Dark Secrets of Pastor Ezekiel's Ministry." The news spread quickly, and Amora watched from a distance as people read the article, their faces filled with shock and disbelief. For the first time, she felt a sense of liberation, knowing the truth was finally out. She only hoped it would be enough to protect her and others from Pastor Ezekiel's wrath. That night, Amora received a phone call. The voice on the other end was low and menacing. "You think you can destroy me?" Pastor Ezekiel's voice was cold, devoid of the warmth he'd always projected. "Faithful ones do not betray. You'll pay for this." Amora felt her hands tremble, but she steadied herself. "The truth is out, Pastor. You can't scare me anymore." He laughed, a dark, chilling sound. "I don't need to scare you, Amora. I just need to remind you what happens to those who stray from the flock." The line went dead, leaving her shaken. She knew she had done the right thing, but she also knew the danger was far from over. 2 days later, Amora received an unexpected visit from the police. They had received anonymous tips about threats Pastor Ezekiel had made to former members and decided to investigate. The officers listened to her story, taking note of her evidence and recordings. Their presence was reassuring, but Amora couldn't shake the feeling that Pastor Ezekiel would find a way to evade justice. "Don't worry," one officer told her. "Men like him think they are above the law, but we'll make sure he answers for what he's done." For the first time, Amora allowed herself to hope. Perhaps justice would finally prevail. With the publication of the article and the police investigation underway, Pastor Ezekiel's church began to fall apart. Attendance dropped sharply as members questioned the truth behind his teachings. The once thriving ministry grew quiet, and rumors circulated about Pastor Ezekiel's possible arrest. Amora watched as the influence he'd wielded over so many began to fade. She felt a mixture of relief and sorrow for those who, like her, had given their trust to him and lost so much. One evening, Amora returned home to find Pastor Ezekiel waiting outside her building. He was alone, his once charismatic face now twisted with anger and bitterness. "You think you've won?" he spat, his voice trembling with rage. "You think you've destroyed me?" Amora stood her ground, meeting his gaze with steady defiance. "This isn't about winning, Pastor. This is about the truth, and setting people free." He sneered, his eyes flashing. "There's no freedom outside my faith. You'll see that soon enough." He turned and walked away, his figure disappearing into the night, leaving Amora shaken but unbroken. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more videos.